Your heart was not created to carry this much weight. Yet somehow, the worries keep piling up quietly, relentlessly. Have you noticed how your mind refuses to rest, even when your body is exhausted? How fear shows up without warning, and peace feels just out of reach. The Bible speaks directly to this moment, not with noise, not with pressure, but with a promise. There's a verse in Scripture that has steadied anxious hearts for generations, spoke calm into chaos, and reminded weary souls that they are not alone. This is not the kind of peace the world offers, temporary and fragile. This is the kind of peace that remains, even when nothing around you changes. If your heart feels unsettled, overwhelmed, or heavy for reasons you can't fully explain, stay here, because what you are about to hear may be exactly what your spirit has been waiting for. Restlessness rarely announces itself loudly. It settles in quietly, often at night, when everything finally slows down. The body lies still, but the mind keeps moving. Thoughts replay conversations. Worries stretch into tomorrow. And the heart feels heavy without a clear reason. This experience is not new. The Bible records the same inner turmoil thousands of years ago. David wrote about a soul that felt downcast and disturbed within him. Elijah collapsed under a tree, overwhelmed and exhausted, asking God for relief. Even the disciples struggle with fear while walking closely with Jesus. Modern life may move faster, but the human heart has not changed. We still long for safety, for certainty, for peace that feels solid. Have you noticed how distractions help only for a moment? How silence can feel uncomfortable instead of restful? Scripture reveals a quiet truth. A restless heart is often a signal, not a failure. A sign that the soul is searching for something deeper than relief. It is searching for peace that comes from God. One of the hardest things for the human heart to accept is that God often gives peace before he gives answers. We want clarity first, an explanation, a reason why things feel uncertain or out of control. But Scripture shows a different pattern. When the angel spoke to Mary, her future was unclear, yet the message began with, "Do not be afraid." Peace came before understanding. When Jesus calmed the storm, the disciples were still in the boat, still surrounded by danger, yet the wind obeyed his voice before their questions were answered. Biblical peace is not the absence of problems. It is the presence of God within them. Have you noticed how your heart searches for certainty when what it truly needs is reassurance? God often quiets the heart not by explaining every detail, but by reminding us who is in control. This is why Scripture does not say, "Understand, and then you will have peace." It teaches the opposite. Trust first, and peace follows. There's a reason certain verses remain alive across centuries. They were not written for calm seasons alone, but for moments when the heart feels overwhelmed. This particular verse was spoken into uncertainty, not comfort, not ease. It was given people facing fear, pressure, and the unknown. People whose circumstances had not yet changed. The words are simple, yet profound. They do not rush the heart. They do not demand strength. Instead, they offer something deeper, a reassurance that God is near, attentive, and present. Before the verse is fully understood, it is felt. It settles the breathing. It slows the racing thoughts. Have you noticed how certain words carry weight beyond their meaning? How Scripture sometimes speaks directly to what you cannot explain. This verse does not promise instant solutions. It does not remove responsibility, or reality. What it offers is steadiness, a reminder that peace is not found in control, but in trust placed in the hands of God. And for generations, that reminder has been enough to calm the heart. This verse is often read quickly, but rarely allowed to settle. Its power is not in how familiar it sounds, but in what it invites you to release. At its core, the verse is not a command to feel calm. It is an invitation to stop carrying what was never meant to rest on your heart. Scripture does not shame anxiety. It redirects it. It acknowledges the weight you feel and gently points your focus away from fear and toward trust. Have you noticed how your thoughts tighten when you try to control outcomes you cannot see? This verse is not asking you to ignore reality. It is asking you to shift where your attention rests. From endless, what if questions to the steady presence of God. When read slowly, the verse speaks personally, not as a distant promise, but as a present assurance. It reminds you that peace is not something you create. It is something you receive when your heart turns toward God instead of inward. And in that turning, the heart begins to soften. There is something powerful about speaking Scripture quietly, not be heard by others, but to steady your own heart. When this verse is repeated in silence, it begins to change the atmosphere within you. Your breathing slows. Your thoughts lose urgency. The Bible often describes God working in stillness, not in hurry, not in force. Isaac meditated in the field at evening. David calmed his soul like a child at rest. Jesus withdrew to quiet places to pray. Repeating this verse is not about ritual. It is about attention. Each time the words are spoken, they gently interrupt anxious thought patterns. They remind the heart where safety truly is. Have you noticed how fear grows louder when the mind is left unchecked? Scripture, when repeated with intention, creates space between the heart and its worries. Not everything changes immediately, but something shifts, and in that quiet repetition, the heart begins to remember that it does not face the weight of life alone. One of the most misunderstood ideas about peace is the belief that it requires perfect circumstances. Scripture tells a different story. When Jesus spoke peace to the storm, the disciples were still in the boat. The waves were real. The danger was present. Peace did not come from escape. It came from His presence. The Bible never promises a life without trouble. It promises a heart that does not have to be ruled by it. Have you noticed how you keep waiting for things to settle before allowing yourself to rest? Biblical peace does not depend on control. It depends on trust. David wrote Psalms of peace while hiding in caves. Paul spoke of contentment while imprisoned. Peace in Scripture is not the removal of uncertainty. It is the ability to remain anchored while uncertainty remains. And this verse speaks directly into that reality, reminding the heart that it can be calm even when the storm continues. The mind will always look for something to hold on to. If it is not anchored in truth, it drifts toward fear. This is why Scripture is meant to be remembered, not just read. When anxious thoughts return, this verse becomes a place to return to as well. Not to fight the mind, but to guide it. The Bible often speaks of remembrance. Israel was told to remember what God had done. Jesus reminded His disciples of His words when fear threatened to take over. Anchoring your thoughts does not mean ignoring reality. It means choosing where your focus rests when emotions rise. Have you noticed how one fearful thought can pull many others with it? This verse interrupts that pattern. It creates a pause. a moment to breathe, a moment to realign, writing it down, repeating it quietly, returning to it throughout the day. These simple acts are not small. They are how the heart learns where safety truly is. And over time, that anchor begins to hold. If this verse brought even a small sense of calm to your heart, don't let the moment pass quietly. Take a second and share in the comments what has been weighing on your heart lately. Not to explain everything, just to acknowledge it. Your words might be the reminder someone else needs today. And as this video comes to an end, you'll see another message appear on your screen, one that continues this journey of faith, peace, and trust. Stay with it. But before you move on, consider this honestly. What would change in your life if you allowed God's peace to guard your heart before your circumstances changed? Leave your answer in the comments.